Hi, Emma Shepherd from the AI Advantage Academy. Really delighted to bring you the interview I did with Philip Young, CEO of Garfield AI, on the 17th of October. Now, Garfield AI hit the headlines earlier in 2025 when it became the first AI-powered legal services firm in the UK. I really wanted to speak to Phil about the journey from being a city lawyer to running an AI-powered legal services firm, not only in terms of what it can deliver to small businesses for affordable debt recovery, but also his journey. He actually came out of retirement to create this company, and we speak about the team that he created, how long it took from the initial idea to launching, and what the future holds and how he's going to evolve his product. So I really hope you enjoy the interview. This is part of the AI Advantage community called the Business Growth Collective, which you can join completely free of charge, and there'll be a QR code at the end of the interview. And as a member of the Growth Collective, you will have access to free events like this. We have another AI Innovator coming next month. I run these once a month, as well as free AI masterclasses to upskill you, and also peer spotlights so you can hear from other business owners about what they are doing with AI in their businesses, and coffee and collaboration networking events. We have over 100 members and it's growing all the time. So it would be great to see you there. Follow the QR code at the end of this presentation, and I hope you enjoy the interview.
Yeah, so by way of context, I'm a solicitor and I have been in practice for about 25 years now. And primarily until Garfield, I was in practice in London and I was doing big ticket commercial dispute resolution. So, basically disputes between very rich companies and individuals, with sums anything up to billions of pounds at stake. And of that period, the last 13 years or so was as co-founding partner of my own law firm. Anyway, I retired after COVID because I didn't enjoy being stuck at home very much, and I decided I wanted to see the world. And that, in a sense, is where Garfield comes from, because while I was traveling across America with my family, that's when ChatGPT 3.5 came out. And it was pretty clear to me immediately that this sort of technology is going to absolutely transform professional services, and particularly my world of law. And so I sort of parked that thought because I was having far too much fun in America to do anything about it. But then the next spring, ChatGPT 4 came out, and that was such a big jump in capability that I then thought, gosh, this isn't a toy anymore. It's something you could build something useful with. And because by this point in my retirement, I'd repainted the whole of the house and I was beginning to annoy my wife by being underfoot, I was told I had to do something with my life. And I thought, well, I will do something with this technology. And the problem I decided I wanted to solve was a problem that my brother-in-law, Andy, has from time to time. And he's a typical sole trader. He's a plumber. He works for himself. And from time to time, people just don't pay him. And they don't pay him because they're insolvent. I mean, that would just be a risk of doing business. Whenever they don't pay him, it's not because they've got a problem with this service. It's solely because they know that small business people don't have the time or energy to chase debts. They've got to spend their time working and earning a living, not writing chasing letters and making phone calls. And if they have to go as far as a small court claim, they find the process daunting. And unfortunately, and no disrespect to my profession, it's not economic usually to instruct a normal law firm, because there's no point if you're chasing £3,000 paying someone £2,500 to do that work. It's just not a sensible use of money. And so fortunately for him, he had a brother-in-law who was a city litigation partner, but we don't have enough plumbers in this country who've got brothers-in-laws who happen to be city litigation partners. And so I thought, why not solve this problem? Why not build something that helps businesses collect smaller debts up to £10,000? And that's where Garfield comes from. And let me just show you how it works and what it does. Let me just share my screen. So you should now be seeing, yes, you are seeing. So this is Garfield. Garfield is a law firm, is regulated like a law firm. It complies all the same rules. And so to be able to access Garfield, you have to onboard like you would do with a traditional law firm, but you do it in a digital way. In other words, you have to prove who you are. You have to sort of go through know your client and anti-money laundering stuff. But on the assumption you've got through all of that, and I have let the user onto the platform, you'll see something like this. So at the first stage, what Garfield is expecting from people using it are the unpaid invoices. And if you have a written contract, that is helpful as well, though not absolutely necessary. And that's because Garfield pulls relevant and useful information out of the contract too, to save you time, to save you being asked about that information by Garfield. So we tried to build this so it is super convenient to use, so that people that aren't lawyers can use it really easily. So there's various ways you can give it invoices. If you are connected to any of these four accounts platforms, you can just simply connect to your accounts platform and ingest invoices directly that way. Another way is you could just upload them from your computer, or my personal favorite, you can just drag and drop. So I'm just dragging and dropping now, dummy invoice and a dummy contract. You could accompany these documents with a little description you could type in, but I'll be a bit lazy and I'll just simply send the documents to Garfield and let Garfield read them and think about them. So here's a dummy invoice and a dummy corresponding contract that's relevant to the invoice. And what Garfield does at every stage is it asks itself for that stage of a debt claim, what it expects to receive from the user, what it's actually received, whether it needs anything else, any other information, and then it tells you what it's understood. And that's important because it seeks to do the same as a good law firm would do. In other words, it seeks to tell users what it's understood from what it's been told, so that it reduces the risk of any misunderstanding. So here we've seen that Garfield has read the documents and it's now telling us what it's understood. It's understood the details of the parties. It's understood relevant and key bits of information about the contract and relevant and key bits of information about the invoice. And of course, you could put multiple invoices onto Garfield for a claim, as long as you don't exceed the 10,000 limit that is a small claims limit in court. And then it tells you the next steps. So do you want to send a polite chaser, or do you want to proceed directly with sending a formal letter for action? And because this is an access to justice product, we've assumed that people using this might know nothing at all about how to bring a small debt claim. And so wherever there are sort of legal terms of art, you'll see little dots underneath. And then if you hover, you get a little explanation of what that thing is. So let's say I want to send a formal letter for action. I'll just say LBA. And then Garfield should do the same thing you've just seen, which is it will ask itself what it knows, what it needs to know to generate the document. If there's a bit more information that weren't in those documents, then it will pull the information out. And while we wait for it to do that, let's just go back and have a little look at some other information here that's relevant. So one of the things that used to really annoy me as a lawyer was having to do all the maths, all the interest calculations, because lawyers and mathematics are not two things that are often sort of known as being happy bedfellows. And so one of the things we built into Garfield was the ability to understand that there are 3 different jurisdictional bases in English law by which you can be awarded interest. So if you've got a contractual clause in your contract that gives you a right to interest, alternatively, you might be entitled under the Late Payment Act. Alternatively, you might be entitled under the County Courts Act. And then there might be different rates that are applicable. So your contract might provide that the rate is compounding, or it might provide it's simple. It might say the interest rate is a flat rate, or it might say it's a rate above the Bank of England base rate, or LIBOR, or those sort of things. And Garfield looks at that information and works out for you what is your relevant legal entitlement, and then does all the maths for you. So Garfield's understood we want to go ahead with a letter for action. And it's worked out that it needs a bit more information to generate the document. So it wants to know whether the defendant is a consumer or a business. It wants a valid email address for the defendant. And that's because this email address that was on the invoice is a fake one. There's not a real email address. And Garfield gives users the option, if they want it, for Garfield to email the documents out from Garfield. So obviously, in order to be able to do that, Garfield needs a valid email address, which is why it's asked. Payment date. So this invoice that I put on was originally for 1.38k, but there was a part payment of £150, leaving 1.23k left to claim. But obviously, to work out interest, Garfield needs to know when that part payment was made. So you can see Garfield is looking all the time. How do I calculate interest? I need to know things like when installments were paid in order to do the calculations correctly. So if I just tell Garfield some answers, so I say the defendant is a consumer, the defendant's email address is, and I'll give it a real email address that's just a spam one. The payment date was 1st March 2024, no additional charges. Okay. So we've answered Garfield's questions, and it will go away and think a little bit, and should have all the information it needs now to generate the letter for action, and then should go ahead and generate it and display it for the user to have a look at and think about whether they are. There we are. That was quick. So here it is. I'll just get rid of the invoice. So here we have a court pre-action protocol compliant lead for action that sort of asks for payment, and a couple of things I'll draw to your attention, and we'll come back to the interest calculations. So Garfield will work out automatically for you if the debtor is an individual or they're an incorporated company. If they're an individual, the protocol says you've got to attach the information sheet, the reply form, and the financial document. Those are things a court requires. Garfield does all that for you automatically. If I had put a dummy invoice on that showed the debtor was a company in England and Wales as opposed to an individual, you'd have seen Garfield do something a bit different. You'd have seen it go to Companies House, check on the status of that company and report back, tell you if it's trading or if it's in liquidation or if it's administration. And if it's in liquidation administration, recommend that actually you just put a proof of debt into the liquidation. And that's intended to help people not waste time and money pursuing debtors that are bust. In any event, Garfield, if there were financial statements at Companies House of that debtor, you would have seen Garfield pull those and display those for you and give you a view about whether or not the debtor is good for the money. And again, that's an attempt to help users decide for themselves whether they actually want to pursue the relevant case. I mentioned Garfield does all the interest calculations for you. You can tell that one of my team is a mathematician because this is a lot more complicated than a lawyer would do. But it basically breaks down the calculation for each invoice and shows you how it's calculated, and you can attach it to this document if you want, so the debtor can see the calculation. So there are various options with the letter for action. You can have it on our letter paper, Garfield's paper, which we tend to recommend because we think that you get a much more effective result by sending a letter on a law firm's paper than sending it on your own. But you can white label, you can put it onto custom, so you can put it onto your own paper if you want. And some of our users wanted this option, which is to put it onto a simple letterhead. And so we've given that to them as well. No money goes through our hands. So we expect debtors to pay our users directly rather than to pay us and for us to pass the money on. And that's for two reasons. One, that's what our users would prefer. And secondly, frankly, it's also a bit of self-interest, because if I had the money flowing through Garfield, then we're a law firm, we'd have to have a client bank account. That's a lot of regulatory overhead. And I ran a law firm for many years, and I just don't need that. And it's just better if money doesn't go through us, it goes directly. So you can see that there's an option to say which bank account the debtor should pay that then goes into the letter. And for our larger users that are using this in volume, we constrain who can change the bank accounts. It's only senior people amongst those users who can do that. And that's an obvious anti-fraud protection, because no big company wants a junior person trying to divert money elsewhere. Various other options. You can schedule letters to go in the future, which is this option here. We give users the option to ask us to post a hard copy of the letter. Alternatively, they can choose not to do that. They can choose just to download it and post it themselves. So that's just a convenience thing. And we'll come back to sort of the business model in a moment. But the key point to take away from this is that if you go to a law firm, it takes human time to generate a letter for action, because a lawyer's got to read all the documents, do some Q&A with the user, sit down and do the interest calculations, think about bits about like what documents they need to attach. Are they dealing with an individual debtor or a company? And so in practice, when I was doing this in the city, obviously for much bigger claims, it was still at least half an hour to an hour of my time, and sometimes longer. And inevitably, there was a cost associated with that. Whereas what you've just seen is taken under a couple of minutes. And therefore, one of the great benefits of AI is the ability to cut out a lot of that, and therefore to pass cost savings on to the people that use things like this. I should say that although I think I'm pretty quick at my own product, I am by no means the quickest. And we saw a user last week who has been using Garfield for quite a few of their debts, and they've sort of evolved with the product. They've learned how to use it better than us, and they've got it down to the point where they can generate an LBA in under 45 seconds, which is just amazing. I mean, it just demonstrates how this sort of technology can really save people time. I'll show you another step, and then I'll show you a few other things about how Garfield works. So ordinarily at this point, the debtor's got 30 days under the protocol to respond, and it might be that the debtor pays immediately, which is our majority experience. About 60 to 80% of the time when they get a letter like this, they pay because they can see the creditors taking it seriously. It might be that they write and ask for time and indulgence, in which case if they write to Garfield, it comes into Garfield. If they write to the user directly, we ask the user to put it into Garfield so Garfield can hold the user's hand through that. It might be that they ignore the LBA, or it might be that they write back and say they've got a defense, in which case Garfield will help deal with that. But let's just show you just quickly the next step of the process if they ignore the LBA or say that they're not paying. So if I'm just going to trick Garfield into thinking I've paid for that document. So we have all these sort of cheat codes built in that enable us to test the product and to jump around stages. We're a regulated law firm, and it's therefore important that a lawyer checks documents before they go out the door. So for those users who are not law firms, and we've got quite a lot of law firms using Garfield for their own debts and for their clients' debts, users will see these messages appear. They'll see the first message saying, thanks for paying the fee, our team will review the document, they'll contact you if there are any changes needed, and then it will come to me to be checked. And then once I've checked it and I've approved it, you get a further message saying we've reviewed and approved the document, and then we'll tell you the deadline for the next stage, which is the 30 days the debtor's got to respond, which in this case takes you to the 17th of November and shows you the documents that have gone out the door.
Philip, your microphone's gone off all of a sudden. I can't hear you either.
How's this? Is this better?
You're back. Yeah. So we didn't
Okay.
hear anything for about the last minute or two. Sorry.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll just repeat myself then. Do give me a prod if that happens again.
Yes.
Yeah. So I hopefully had got as far as explaining that all documents that go out the door are checked by a solicitor before they are sent. And that's important, both from a sort of prudential perspective and also from a regulatory perspective. In the case of users who are not law firms, then I check the documents. In the case of our users who are law firms who are using Garfield either to pursue their own debts or pursue their clients' debts, in some cases they're using their own solicitor to check the documents. But in any event, a solicitor always checks the document before it goes out the door. So you would see, using Garfield, you'd see these messages if I'm checking the documents. You see a message, first of all, saying we've got the document, we're going to check it, we'll let you know if we're happy with it. Then you see a further message that that tells you once it's been reviewed and approved, that it has been reviewed and approved, and the deadline for the next step. And then what I did was I tricked Garfield into thinking 33 days had gone by, just so that I can show you the next stage, which is generating a claim form quickly. Which is why this date changed to the 14th of October from November, because I tricked Garfield into thinking everything that we just did happened on the 14th of September rather than a few minutes ago. So if I just tell Garfield now, I received a call from the debtor. He told me he is not going to pay. And what you should now see is Garfield will have a think about that and will say to itself, okay, in that case, if the user wants to, and they don't have to, the next stage will be generating a claim form. And then Garfield will ask for the further information needed for the claim form document. And lo and behold, I understand you received a call from the debtor saying they won't pay, helps clarify their position, And the next steps, to prepare your claim form, we need the following information. So are there any vulnerable people associated with the contract? And a court selection. Garfield knows where all the county courts are geographically in England and Wales, and will try and find the county court closest to you. In this case, I think I gave it an invoice, a dummy invoice that was Tunbridge Wells. Dummy invoice Tunbridge Wells. So it found Maidstone. So there's your nearest county court. Obviously, you don't have to select that. You could ask for a different county court. And in time, what we hope with this is that when we have a large volume of claims going through the platform, we will have data that isn't publicly available about the relative efficiencies of different county courts, and therefore we'll be able to direct users to the county court near them that happens to be the swiftest. And actually, the court system is very excited about that too, because it will help them balance the load, which at the moment they can't do. So if I say there are no vulnerable individuals, please can I have Clerkenwell County Court? Okay, and just send that. That has answered those two questions. Garfield may have some further questions, or may be satisfied that it's now got all the information it needs, in which case it will then generate the claim form and display it in the same way you saw before. It pops up on the right, and it's going quicker than I am today. So here we have a court claim form. It's all been populated. It's calculated interest up to this date for you automatically. It knows the relevant court fee and the recoverable fee. It's put Clerkenwell County Court in. It's ticked no on vulnerable witnesses. And it's drafted nice, straightforward, simple particulars of claim for you. So it's done all of that. And then what you would do is you'd go in, you'd review it. If you were happy, you'd click and you'd sign it, and then off it goes to court. And then the court, it's sent to the court automatically, electronically, and then the court serves it, and so on and so forth. I'll just jump to another case that this is a dummy case that went to a dummy trial, just to show you the furthest extent that Garfield goes. So only about 2 to 5% of small debt claims go to a 1-hour trial. Almost all of them, about 60% of them, are not defended and result.
You've gone again. Sorry, Philip. The last thing we heard was 60% are resolved. You're still muted, sorry. No, it's still muted.
Okay.
That's it, you're back.
Back. Okay. I don't know why my computer is muting me. Maybe my computer is rebelling against me, but it's not like lawyers are usually people that other people want to listen to, and maybe my computer's taking the same view. I'll move my windows around a little bit, so I'm now going to keep a close eye on my microphone icon. Okay. If it does any more rebellion. But so this is a case that's gone to a dummy trial, and it goes all the way up to the doorstep of the court for you. So it generates everything up to and including the trial bundle automatically, with little clickable links in it. It does a little skeleton argument for the court. And this is a bit that when you show this to the judiciary, they get really excited about, because one of their biggest problems is the sheer number of people that turn up in front of them that have had no legal representation, and just sort of give them a, no disrespect, just a mess of documents, and expect the judge to try and work out the case in the hour that the judge is given. So if you give a judge a uniformly prepared quality case, it makes their lives so much easier, particularly if you give them a little skeleton argument. Although for the 2 to 5% of cases that end up at a trial, we're very agnostic, and some users will want to represent themselves. Some users will want to send along a local law firm, and that's fine. And some users will want to send a barrister along, and we've got an arrangement with a set of chambers that will send a junior barrister to any county court in England for users. So that's as far as Garfield goes. It can't actually go into court and do advocacy for you. That's the one thing it doesn't do. Another quick example, a default judgment case. So this is very common. About 60-70% of all small debt claims end up in a default judgment that the user then goes off and enforces. So that's this dummy case, and Garfield, because there was no reply to the claim form, has just generated the default judgment application form, filled in all the relevant boxes, done all the maths for you. The user sent it to court, and then what came back was a judgment for the user in the sum of money they were claiming. And then Garfield generated a letter to the debtor saying, here's a judgment, pay up or else. I showed you the documents archive that sort of auto-populates as you go along, depending on where your case is. We've got a page on settlement that starts by saying it's always a good idea to try and settle a case, helps you create settlement letters. If you get settlement letters on the side, they'll come into here and it helps you handle them. We've got a details page that tells you about your case and where it's reached and who the parties are, gives you the most recent interest calculation that updates as the case goes on. And also for users who aren't law firms, there's a cost calculator that shows you where you are, what the costs are, what the net cost is. And I'll come back to that because a lot of the costs will be recoverable from a debtor if you prevail. For users that use Garfield in volume, there's a claims table that shows you all your claims. And obviously you can fillet it by where claims are and do various other things to it. I mentioned earlier, we've got Teams functionality as well. So for bigger users who've got an accounts function and they're using this with a team of credit controllers, then you can invite other people into Garfield to run cases for you and give them different levels of authority. And then finally, and the least attractive bit of the product at the moment, is a calendar that auto-populates with dates and deadlines. So as things happen in your claims, Garfield will automatically populate the relevant deadline or the relevant reminder into the calendar, and also give you, in a different format, this sort of thing that just keeps you up to date with where you are and reminds you when there are things that need to happen. Which is something lawyers are very keen on, because litigation is largely it's project management, and so you need to sort of remember when things need to happen and make sure you don't forget to do them. I mentioned a little bit about the economic model. So Garfield is an access to justice product, and the one thing we didn't want to do was discourage people from being able to collect their debts, because the whole point of Garfield is to try and help people recover their debts, particularly small debts. So, you know, sort of a couple of £1,000 for my brother-in-law Andy, maybe the sort of debt that a big city law firm would just write off as being not worthy of pursuit. But for him, it's summer holiday. So it's really important to make that sort of debt recoverable. And so the business model is that we don't charge a subscription, because that would be a barrier to entry. As long as someone appears to be a legitimate business, they can come onto the platform and have a play with it for free. And what we do instead is that we have a pay-as-you-go model. So we only ask users to pay for the particular stages that they've actually used. And that avoids having a model that charges a percentage of a claim or something, and then users are paying for stuff that they haven't used. So we avoid that. And wherever we can for the particular stages, we've charged no more than what the court allows you to recover if you prevail. So in other words, for most of the court stages, the court says, if you charge up to a certain amount of money, you can claim that back from the debtor as part of the claim. And that's our business model. So we've tried to ensure that the net cost to a user when pursuing a debtor that's solvent is minimal, providing, of course, that they actually win the case. So that is a sort of quick summary of what Garfield is, and gives you a sort of view as to how it works, and also a bit of a battle with my microphone. So you've had all of that over the last 20 minutes or so. So I'll sort of stop talking there and open this up to questions and thoughts and comments about my microphone.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Gosh, that was so fascinating, and what an incredible service that you're offering. I've just got a question can you just give us an idea from your initial idea on your American holiday to launch of the platform? What sort of timescale was that?
So we started, Dan and I. So Dan is my technical co-founder. He's a very clever bloke, much cleverer than I am. He's a quantum physicist, so he's a really interesting chap too. He and I, we started in sort of May 2023, and then after we went through the process of being regulated, we were authorized and regulated in March, and so we launched then. So it took us about 2 years to get to the point of launch. So it's taken. So now we're sort of 5 months on from that. So it's been about 2.5 years.
Brilliant stuff. That's really interesting. And can you just give us an idea? So it sounds like you've got Dan. We've got a question from Claire Sharp, who says, have you got any copyright for your idea? Are there similar firms globally?
So there's no one else doing this at the moment. There might be people in the fullness of time who decide to build something similar or identical. We're the first. We're the first law firm anywhere in the world that's been regulated to provide an AI-based service. As for copyright, so the way, I mean, I haven't done any intellectual property law for a very long time, but the way I did study copyright at university, and the way copyright works is it applies automatically. The moment you create an original literary work, you get copyright protection.
Brilliant stuff. That's really interesting. You mentioned there, one of the functionalities you mentioned was an API with Companies House. Is that right? So Garfield can go into Companies House. I mean, that is a phenomenal idea. And also the completing the form. So Garfield will complete a form for you.
Yeah, exactly. So it generates it. You saw the sort of the Q&A process it does to generate a claim form, which normally would take a good few hours of work, and it did it in a couple of minutes. And that's essentially what Garfield tries to do. It tries to just hold the user's hand through each stage of the court process and ask the relevant questions, get the relevant information, and then populate the relevant court documents and send them to court on the other side for you. And Garfield, as you said, it's an integrated product. It integrates with Companies House, it integrates with the courts API, integrates with users' accounts packages, and we're building more stuff all the time. And the next thing we're going to do is build a judgment enforcement product that will integrate with things like the land registry as well.
Gosh, incredible. Tim, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Philip, for outlining everything that Garfield AI does. I've literally just signed up my business Ancorum in the last 10 minutes while this has been going on.
Thank you.
So and it's all pending approval now. So brilliant. One question I have you thought about where you might expand the business into next? I mean, one area that comes to mind particularly is employment law, both from the employee and the employer perspective. Given the process of notifying ACAS is in itself a straightforward process, and the various negotiations, and particularly the new employment law requirements that are going to be staggered over the next couple of years. Is that an area that Garfield AI might expand into in the not too distant future?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, at the moment, I'm sort of like a lot of lawyers. I'm quite sort of OCD, and I'm presently just obsessed with building out Garfield to handle the complete universe of debt claims. So at the moment, for example, we don't do landlord and tenant debt claims, and we don't do claims arising out of little loan agreements. And I think really we should cover those off. And the other thing we don't do, and it's an obvious type of debt claim, is, and this is to your point, employees who want to sort of claim, or freelancers who want to claim money they're owed under their contract or their contract of employment. So we'll probably extend it to do that sort of work. And then thereafter, I think we're an access to justice. That's our mission. And so we're gonna go, I think, wherever there are real unmet legal needs, this sort of technology can be used to help.
Sorry, you've gone on mute again, Philip. No. No, still muted. There you go, you're back now.
Let me try. I've changed microphone.
Brilliant. Yeah, you're back now.
Right. Okay, I've changed microphone. I'm having a bit of a morning with my microphones, aren't I? Good job I got two. Yeah, we're gonna be very much driven by the access to justice mission, and we built Garfield in a modular way so that we can hopefully adapt it for other sorts of claims reasonably easily. I think if it was an area of law that is not my former area of speciality, then I would need a deep domain expert on that area of law, so a lawyer who's an expert in it to help build it. But that would be the blocker.
Brilliant stuff. Robin, I think that's answered your question, but if there's anything else, just pop something else in the chat. Claire has asked, do you see AI legal firms being created, or another one about employment law actually, another area where individuals might get exploited? Oh yeah, so Claire, you've answered the two questions that Claire and Robin had.
Could I just add one point to that? And that is that there
Yeah.
are other people building stuff in this area. And one thing I'd go and look at if you're interested in this is something called Grapple that's built by a guy called Alex Monaco, who's he's a really interesting guy. He's a bit like me. He's a solicitor and he was a founding partner of his own law firm. And Grapple, he's employee side only, but he's building something with Grapple to try and help employees bring things like discrimination claims and victimization claims and stuff like that. And I've been teasing him a bit by saying, well, if you build the employee side, someone else is then going to build the employer side, and you're going to be in an arms race.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. I had a question about the use case. So you mentioned you've got law firms that use this platform as well as consumers. Do you have do the law firms subscribe? Is that a slightly different business model for larger organizations?
No, it's exactly the same business model, and they do exactly the same things. The only privilege that law firms have over non-law firms is that they're entitled to use Garfield for their clients' debts as well. But we don't allow non-law firms to act essentially as an agent for a third party, and that's because there's various regulatory rules that forbid that. Yeah, I saw the further comments appearing, and yeah, I have been an employer for many years rather than an employee. I was an employee a very long time ago, so I have now more of an employer mindset. And I agree that a lot of employers are held to ransom by disgruntled employees in the employment tribunal, and so I think there is a big market for companies to have something like Grapple but on their side. So I'm sure that's coming. Someone will build it, even if we don't.
Brilliant. The other question I have is around, so you've said you've been an employer, so you went to scale a law firm, you've had to go through recruitment, etc. Now you have a very different business model. What does scalability look like with an AI-powered legal services firm?
So it's very different because a law firm is a very human resources focused business, and your ability to do more work is solely driven by the number of lawyers you can employ and supervise. And it's the supervision actually that is a fundamental bottleneck, because even a partner only has so many hours in the day. With an AI business like this, that bottleneck disappears, and the technology can do so much that actually you can run things at much greater scale, which is part of the reason why you can then pass on the savings to users so that they pay a tiny percentage of what they would pay a traditional law firm to do the same work. The bottleneck is in the review and approving process that I showed everyone, and the position there is that as we scale, the regulator and I have agreed that over time, once we are comfortable that particular stages are being done at the quality level that we expect without a human needing to look it over, then we will allow the technology to do that, and I will move to more of a risk-based sampling approach of looking at documents. One thing that's really interesting in talking to other lawyers is lawyers tend to be humanities graduates rather than science graduates. And lawyers are not necessarily the best at understanding mathematics and its potential, which is part of the reason that AI has come as a bit of a surprise to lawyers and what it can do. And it's quite interesting explaining. I'm more of a mathematician than I'm a humanities person. And it's quite interesting explaining to lawyers that you can mathematically model a document and confidence score it on its accuracy. So you can build tools like we've built that will look at a class of documents, providing you've got a statistically relevant data set, and say, I am 99% sure this document is accurate. And then you can build a tool that says, if you're less than 99% sure, then you elevate that to a human lawyer to look at. And so you can build all these tools that will reduce the need for human oversight and turn it into a world where the human oversees the electronic tools that in turn oversee the user's documents.
Brilliant. And going back to your team, so you've gone from idea to launch and you've put your team. Now you've gone through the whole journey of creating an AI firm. What do you think is the minimum requirement to create a team in terms of the skill set?
So to build something like this, I think you need two sets of skills. You need someone who's a really deep domain expert on the relevant area of law. And I think that person is fundamental, because you could not build a product like this unless you hadn't been in practice for many years and understood what scientists call all the edge cases, all of the more unusual scenarios that can be thrown up by a claim that you then have to be able to handle in the product. And the other side of it is you need a really good technologist. And ideally, and this is where it gets quite difficult to find people, you want a lawyer who is also quite techie themselves. And because I'm a giant computer nerd, because I grew up in the 70s and 80s with the microcomputer revolution and BBC Bs and ZX Spectrums and all of that, I've always been a big computer nerd, and so I know how to program. And so it's been a lot easier than I think it otherwise would have been, because Dan and I and the rest of the programming team, we can all talk on the same level. So I can take legal concepts and I can translate it into language they understand, rather than have to have a sort of interpreter between the lawyer and the coder. And in fact, in the early days, when it was just Dan and myself, and then Dan, myself, and Pablo, I did a lot of the coding myself. So I also know the code base, not as well as I did 2 years ago, but I know it pretty well. So sometimes I'll just drop into it and fix something, just to keep my hand in. And that really, really helps. It speeds everything up and makes it much easier.
Brilliant stuff. Has anyone else got any questions before we finish up? I think my last question would be, has it been worth coming out of retirement, Philip, to do this?
Yeah, otherwise I'd been in big trouble with my wife, because I would have kept doing things around the house, and there's a degree to which you can get in trouble if you do that. Yeah, I'm just going to put a link actually to Grapple in the meeting chat, because I saw someone asked for a link, so you've got that now. Yeah, no, it's been really interesting. I mean, lawyers keep asking me what's it like to be building essentially a tech product and working with developers. And it's a really different experience than working with junior lawyers. So lawyers, we tend to be quite OCD, we tend to be perfectionists, we tend to be intense and quite driven. And also we tend to be, particularly younger lawyers, they need a lot of validation. They're quite needy. And that's not a criticism of a different generation. I probably was like that myself when I was in my 20s. Whereas software developers they're really clever, just like a lot of the lawyers I used to work with, but they're much more relaxed, and they've got a much more of a broader view of life. And so it's a sort of a less stressy, intense experience, but also very stimulating in a different way. So it's been great.
Brilliant. And sorry, I do have another question.
Okay.
Your mission, access to justice. I love that. Is that something that you guys created, and how important has that been in terms of you staying on track to achieve your goals?
Well, it's kind of key to everything we've done, because when we started this, we thought, let's solve Andy's problem, and that's an access to justice problem, because that's your ordinary person who's got their own business, who's not getting paid and needs to be able to access the ability to get paid. So we could have gone a different way. We could have done what a lot of AI in the law is doing, which is just start building products for really big law firms. And obviously that's a very different business model, and it's probably in some ways a much better paid business model, because those law firms have got very deep pockets and pay a lot of money for that. But I didn't want to do that. I sort of felt I'd done big law in my time, and those boys can look after themselves. And I grew up in Derbyshire in the Peak District, and when I first began thinking about becoming a lawyer, I did all my work experience at very small local high street firms in Chesterfield, Sheffield, and Manchester. And so I know that world a little bit, and I know that those firms they just don't have the resources to build products like this. And so if someone like I won't build them, then no one will, and they'll just be left out. And so I wanted to build something that sort of helped the smaller businesses and the smaller law firms of this world to achieve something, which in this case is get paid.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Well, that has been so insightful and so interesting. And yeah, you've got a new client as a result of it. It's certainly opened up my eyes, and it's a brilliant opportunity for a small business, and especially your business model, the fact that there is no subscription and we can pay as you go. So it's actually obviously super interesting to find out about the creation of it, but also from a business point of view, brilliant to know that you're out there and we can all potentially use you. So yes, everyone's saying thank you in the chats. So yeah, thank you again, Philip, for your time. It's been really, really useful for everybody, and hopefully we will see more about Garfield AI in the national newspapers like we did last week.
Well, yeah, you'll see us on Monday evening if you want to watch Dispatches, because I think at 8 o'clock on Monday evening, they're screening a TV program where they've got an experiment they're doing in medical. I think they're doing one in fashion and one photography and one in law. And I think Garfield is the thing they're featuring in the law segment. So So you've got that.
Fantastic.
If you want to watch that on Monday evening, you've got that.
Brilliant.
I think what I should do in the meantime though is go out and try and fix my other microphone.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I'll definitely tune into that and see you guys. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm sure I'll see you again in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Okay,
Take
bye bye.
care. Bye.